Welcome back to another video in the series for 2024 lab. As mentioned in the last lab, we were going to start up a domain controller. So today we will do a domain controller. We will do file shares just to show some file shares, and we'll set up NFS sharing, and we'll also set up the ISCSI targets. And the reason for the ISCSI target is because our lab, most likely, people don't have a SAN at home or mass storage. So we will utilize the ISCSI targeting to a host which will hold some disk storage for the VMs to have disk storage presented to them from a SAN type device. So this is our way of doing a home-built cheap lab. So what we'll do is start off with the Windows 2019 server, and we'll have 3 other servers which will eventually become our Hyper-V servers, but for today they'll just be member servers that we join to a domain once we build it. So this server is a standalone 2019 server. Go here, and as you can see here, it's 2019. Now we could have used 2022, but 2019 is fine enough for this. Most common operating system out there still is around 2016, 2019 for most people. Not everybody adapts to the latest and greatest right away, but if you do have support for it, then you generally would go up to the latest version. So let's start with this. So we have a server. It's I named it SRV DC1. That's the name of the server right now. It's part of a work group, which is a standalone, just a base build. So this is what these are, just base builds. I didn't go through a video of base building because I have previous videos in my series, other videos I've created how to install Windows, and taking for granted that some people watching this are people who already know how to do that. We just want to figure out how to make ISCSI targets and things like that in their labs. So this is probably what most people will be watching this video for. So the first thing to do before you make a domain controller is make sure your time is synced, make sure your time zone is checked, make sure you have an IP address, a static IP address. You definitely don't want a DHCP, because if your DNS loses if the server is lost in DNS and it doesn't know where it is in IP range, then you will never find your domain controller. So it's always recommended. I know you can use DHCP and you can pin them, you can do all of that, but generally I still stick with the idea of static IP for servers, so you know where they are. So let's start with this. We have a 192.168.2.170 IP address for a server running 2019. First thing we need to do is what I usually do is when you have a USB or the ISO, basically the server image, ISO, USB, whether it's a plug-in CD-ROM, whichever you're using, I always copy the sources folder onto the C drive. Once it's there, that's the folder where you would do most of your installs from. So if you're installing from the server manager, you want to add in components of Windows, that's where it would come from, the sources folder. So if you copy it there, it's a good idea to have it there so you don't have to always fetch for an ISO or anything you need to do for the server. You know it's there, keep it as a standard image. Okay, so we're going to go to the dashboard here. We're going to add roles, and we need to add a few roles. So you just follow through, next. First role we want to add is Active Directory Domain Services, and it will include the role, the features, and then we want to add a DNS server, because Active Directory needs a DNS server. It doesn't have to be on the same server. You could already have a DNS already existing somewhere. Wherever you point to your DNS, you can use or utilize a brand new DNS server. And we need another function here, which is under File Services. You need ISCSI Target, and just for some more features of sharing disks out from a server, we're going to use NFS, because NFS targeting, we will set up NFS storage to connect to an ESXi host to give it some storage as well. So we're going to use ISCSI targeting right now for our Windows lab in here. We could utilize it as well for ESXi, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So we have 4 things, sorry. We've added Active Directory Domain Services, DNS server, we've added the ISCSI target and NFS, and it included the file server piece because that's part of that role. Click next, and we don't need anything else. Click next, and then it mentions about Active Directory, next, and again DNS, next, custom. This is where you utilize that sources. So click specify alternate source, and type C sources SXS / just like you see up here. Now, the reason why you need to do this is because if you didn't have the ISO attached to the server, it would try to install all these components you're asking for and may fail because it doesn't have the files to do so. So if we point this out, it will then grab the files from that source folder, and we click install. Now, while that's doing that, we'll just step away for a second. So we have 3 other servers. Again, they're 2019 servers, base install, ready to go. And we also have an ESXi host, which again is ready to go. We will access this using a web browser. There we go there. So that will be how we access that server, to show you how to use NFS storage and ISCSI targets, as well as these other hosts. We'll just make sure that these ones, and as you see, these don't have the sources folder, but we don't need them at the moment for that server. Like I said, these are just going to be simple servers we're going to join to the domain once we have the domain up. That's all the purpose of those servers are right now. Okay, so we're back here. Feature installations, all the items are installed. We click close, and you notice the nice warning exclamation up top. And this is basically mentioning to us some features we've installed are going to require more configuration, such as promoting to a domain controller. So we're going to promote this server to a domain controller. And here's where it all starts. So if you've ever done this, then you can go through this quickly, but I'm just showing you how to go through it. We do not have an existing domain. We do not have an existing forest, so I'm going to click Add Forest. Now, for those heavily into adding domain controllers or into domain controllers, yes, we could make 2 servers here. We could make one. This could be our forest, our root of the root domain. So we can say, in this case here, I'm going to call this domain compuguy.local. So this will be our root domain, and it would be the forest. Now, if we wanted to make other domains like a production environment, a development environment, or something else, we could do that as well. And we could just run through this process on another server, and then we could do something like prod dot. So that would be your production, and then you could do dev dot if you wanted to make a development under the same forest. In this case, we're just making a very simple domain controller, so it will be a root of its own forest and a domain, the only domain we will have at the moment. This is again at its basic form. That's the only reason why we're building a domain controller, is because we need it for the other parts of the lab. So I'm building that just to show it. Later on in the labs, I'll create more labs and other videos for going in and defining things like group policies and how to push out policies to servers, things like that. We could delve into that as well. So without further ado, let's go here next. And it's running at a 2016 domain level. Now, remember what I just said, it was 2019. So why wouldn't it be 2019 level? Windows 2019 is really just 2016 with patches, just like Windows 10 with I think 20H1, 20H2. Those are levels, patch levels of the operating system, because they don't change the operating system. So really 2019 is just an upgraded patch or a patch level, not too much of a facelift on the OS itself. So they just left the domain at a 2016 level. This is where we'll be. And we're creating a DNS server, which we'll configure that as well. And this server will be a global catalog. Now, in order to restore, we need to go to DSRM. So we need to just have a password, just in case you want to uninstall. Or you need to get into a recovery mode to get back there. And you notice the one here is unchecked as read-only domain controller. We don't need a read-only domain controller. We need a writable domain controller for this domain. If you had several domain controllers out in the field in different sites to help speed up logins, you could create read-only, so they'll get the updated information from the main or the global catalog or other domain controllers that are writable. So you could put read-only domain controllers out in an area where you don't need it to update from that point. They can update through others. But we aren't going to talk about read-only today or need one today. And here's a warning that just basically says cannot be a delegation for this DNS cannot be created because authoritative parent zone cannot be found. Well, it's the only zone, so it can't find anything else. And it tells you here that it's okay. No action is required. So I'm just going next. And the net bias name, this is basically Windows and its net bias lookups. It can look up net bias from a basic lookup net bias. It can go through WINS, DNS, so forth, host file, LM host, all of that. So a net bias lookup is basically the name of the domain without the dot, anything without the dot. So if it's compugata.info or .local, you would just do that. And that's what it uses there. Again, most people would understand this. If you don't, now you understand. And my videos aren't really intended on, the administrator that's been around for 30 years is going to watch my videos. This is more for students, newbies, just anybody who's just looking to pick up on how to do certain things. This video, of course, its aim is just to get the configuration going for our lab. That's really what I'm trying to do. But I'll explain some things as I go through. So here's the locations of the domain controller files and components. And it gets to the part where it wants to now run the script. Now, if you haven't seen this before, there's a PowerShell script. Everything in Windows is PowerShell now, right? So this here is a PowerShell script created that does exactly what we're telling it to do here. Just it did it through a wizard here. So let's go next. And it will install. It'll do a prerequisite. It's going to come up and mention about that DNS information. And it will also mention that my password is not extremely cryptographic. It's not, there's not a larger amount of characters in the password. And it just mentions that here, that the algorithms and cryptography. So we could skip that for now because, again, we just need a basic domain controller. Install. Of course, it mentions the old Windows NT4, which I don't think anybody's using as well. That's what part of this is about. And delegation cannot be created. We already know that. And it's going to reboot us. So we'll click close. Because the process of doing the domain install is now completed. So we have our roles installed, AD, we have DNS installed, we have those other roles we put in, which is the ISCSI Target and the NFS file system support. And now what we can do while this boots up, it's going to take a few minutes. We can go over here and prep these machines to join the domain. So right here we have an IP address as well. We have the proper time zone. Let's click on here and let's join the domain. We'll just get it ready. compugata.local, click OK. It's going to go searching. Of course, I'm not going to find it until it's up. We'll just leave it there for a second, wait till this is up. Now at this point, apply computer settings. A lot of services have started at this point, so we could attempt again for it to go out. And of course, it's not going to do it. So let's cancel this. We won't be impatient. Let's wait for this. So applying computer settings, those are the settings that we just made changes. So making it into a domain controller. And then you'll see computer settings come up and then eventually the login page. So let's go to Hype 2, see if we can kick this off now. Again, impatience. And there it is. So administrator, that's the administrator of the domain, which is the server we're trying to connect to, is the DC. And then password that we know. And it says password is incorrect. I typed it incorrectly. Okay. It should join the domain right away. and it wants to reboot. Before you do that, click on remote. Make sure you have the remote settings allowed so we can RDP to it, and click close and restart. Let's go back to this one, do the same thing. So now we're joining the domain. Now you could use PowerShell and all that stuff, I know, but I'm just doing, oh, forgot I named my domain local. And of course this isn't seeing it, so we might need to give this one a reboot because I was impatient. So let's give this one a reboot. And go to the third one, we'll join. And it's not letting us go there. So let's check and see why. Is our DNS correct? Is our information correct going to the, to be able to talk to the domain controller? So there we go. Yep. So now on my clients, I'm pointing to DNS. The DNS happens to be my domain controller. Let's just, yeah, it's still not quite there yet. So we're jumping the gun, of course. So I am confirming that that is going there. My secondary would go to my DNS server of my, on that network that I'm working with, is that DNS server as well, and the gateway. Just leave that be. And we're just being just a little impatient, waiting. So waiting. This one is back. Waiting again. Number 2 is back. This one here actually joined the domain. So this would be the administrator of the local machine. And as you can see, config guy, now this would be the administrator of the domain. And I'm going to just go like this, and that will force it to go local. But see how it's going type 2. So what we want to do is we want to type config guy, force it to go to the domain. And so now we're logged on as the administrator in the domain. So of the domain controller. That's up now. Let's confirm we can join. And there we go. Again, the focus of this video is not really, the focus of this lab is not really to worry about a domain controller, it's just having one. So we just want to make sure we can join all these machines to the domain. Because we want to proceed forward with the entire lab. So let's go back to the domain controller, let those ones reboot. There we are. And like I said, in future video of this entire lab, we will eventually get back to the domain controller and do some funky things like showing group policy, play with that, play with, perhaps we'll play with roaming profiles, we'll play with file redirection instead of roaming profiles. I've made videos like this before, but I thought maybe I'd refresh them in this new lab. So we see now we have our DNS server, right? This is the Windows tools here. I'd rather go here to see my DNS server. We have our Active Directory, so there's our Active Directory. And we're going to pull up our DNS server. And right there. Okay, so we have our Active Directory. We see there the computers. There's the 3 computers joined the domain, and there's our domain controller. So we have our domain built. We have users here. If we want to create a new user, we can. Let's create another user. Now, when you create users, you should fill in everything you can for a user, because it's nothing more annoying when you have 3 users the same name. So you want to create a proper naming structure. give a good example of reason why is my name is Ron Martin, and there was a case where there was a Richard Martin and a Rick Martin, and they all worked for the same place. So I had an R Martin label. They couldn't use R Martin, so then they had to use an RI. But what about the Richard and Rick are same spelling, RI. So then you had to start using maybe a middle initial. So you really need to get your naming standard down pat, just in case you have someone with the same last name. I mean, nowadays, Martin and Ron are two first names, really. They could be. So you always want to make sure you have a good naming standard established when you do Active Directory accounts, or even any accounts, really. So Company Guy user is created. I'm just going to put them into the admins. And this is just more for me to use that instead of typing administrator. So okay, so verifies we have an Active Directory too. Okay, so there we go. We have an Active Directory. We have DNS. The DNS record was created to CompuGuy.local. It created DMCS. This is the information created from the domain setup, as well as right here. So we have sites, TCP, UDP. We have all the information set up. So if we go right to the root here now, we see that the server names are created and the other servers, the member servers, were created as well. And that just shows that DNS is working. Now, one thing a lot of people don't do is create a reverse lookup. We should create a reverse lookup. This is brand new. Let's make create a reverse lookup. Make DNS work correctly. Primary zone, and we want to do everywhere. Right? In this case, I only have one domain, so let's do it the forest level as well. IP4, and we need the IP address. We use that. It does a reverse lookup and auto secure for Active Directory, and finish. And now we have a reverse lookup. So when all the records are created, they'll create reverse lookup records as well. So now that's it for DNS. That's all we care about for now. We just want to make sure the DNS is working properly. Let's go to Computer Manager now. And let's look at disks. So this server, I had created a 500 gigabyte disk I've added to the server. So if you're doing this lab, put as much space as you can to this disk. I give 500 gigabytes for now, but I can add more. And all we do is just add the disk right here. Right. There's my 500 gigabyte disk. I can add another one if I want, but for now, for my purpose, I just need one 500 gigabyte disk. And what we want to do now is we want to do the first thing. Let's make a share. So right now we have the default shares on Windows. And if we go to this server from here, log on as CompuGuy. Now, again, you know how to do servers. You know how to do shares. We know how to do this. We're just kind of doing this for checkpoints. So let's go here. Okay, there's a shares that serve DSO. That's the domain controller. That server that's the default shares it's pushing out. Let's go back to the server. Now you can create a share from here by saying new share, or you can go to the folder. Let's go on stuff, and let's delete this stuff. This is from previous, and let's say new file share. File share. We're going to right click on this, properties, sharing, share, click enter, click share, and now it's shared. We go here, we hit this again, file share is there. Okay, you're in, you're doing good. Now we want to go to advanced sharing and confirm that your share should be everyone full control. As we know, it should be. And then you go to your NTFS to lock it down. So let's go to NTFS, the security here. Let's add domain users. This is my way of doing everyone, and I'm going to get full control because it's my own lab. So any users log on, any servers in your domain can access the share. That's probably the best to do. I don't like using everyone. I just use this because then I know they have to be authenticated at least to get to the share. And it's not that we're sharing anything big, so it's not a big deal. And that's it. Now you notice on the share properties, there's another little tab here called NFS sharing. Now NFS sharing is a way of sharing this file share to anything that can support NFS, like Linux or anything like that. Windows can support it as well. You just have to add the feature in Windows. So because NFS share is here, I'm going to show you something new. So without doing ISCSI first, let's do this. So let's make a disk. Let's call this NFS disk. Right now the share I'm going to show you here is, I'll give you an instance. So let's say you have a pile of ISOs, ISO images or files you need, install files like SQL or any application you need. They're executables, but they're from ISOs. What you can do is you can place all your ISOs inside this folder and from Windows. So this way you can drag and drop things in Windows into the share. And then when you share this through NFS, you can connect it to the back end of VMs. I'll show you how to do that. So let's right click on NFS disk, properties, let's go to NFS sharing, and let's go to manage sharing, share the folder, permissions, put it as read and write. I'm letting all machines, everybody can get to read and write, and then even allow the access to root. Okay, so root can access this as well. Click close. This file, this folder is now NFS shared. See, we got this little NFS shared. So now this is shared. So let's put a file here. Let's see if I can copy something up there from my personal computer. Let's try and get to there. So 192.168.2.170. All right, so 192.1. Okay, so this server, let's just double check the IP. 2.170. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so this server, on that, not able to get to from my PC. Either way, doesn't matter. Oh, there you go. So we want to go CompuGuy, and so it was just waiting for authentication. So now I'm here at file share. I'm going to go to file share, and I'm going to put something up there just to show you something here. So let's go to ISOs, and let's put a server install. So server, Win server, copy, paste. So from my computer outside the lab, I'm copying this up there. So let's get rid of that. That's copying up there. Let's go to this file server, and let's go back to that folder, file share. So here it is here. So I'll show you the reason, what you would do with this. So what I've always done in the past is I've created a Windows Server share, NFS share, to allow my ESXi host to talk to this folder. So I could drag and drop files in there like an ISO, so I can attach it to a VM if I want to create a VM or not. So just give this thing a second to copy the file up. It's a pretty big ISO. And I've done this just to make things easier for me. So if I need an ISO to connect to build a new VM or something like that, or I need files because I forgot to copy the source files up to the C drive, I can connect an ISO to it anytime. If an analyst is trying to install SQL or Oracle or something like that, I can put the ISO in here and just connect it to a VM. Almost done. So while that's doing that, let's go to ESXi server. So as you know, the ESXi server is pretty much useless at this point. You can connect and do Linux commands if you want, but it's supposed to be very simple and straightforward. So let's go to the web interface of this server. So now what we're going to do is go to storage, and we want to add a new storage. So add a data store, and it says creation type. We want to create an NFS data store. So this is going to connect to an NFS data store that's freely available. So let's call this NFS ISO, because that's what we want to do with this, right? We want to make a share, or we want to make something in your VMware ESXi host environment so you can do this. So the server is 192.168.2.170, and the NFS share is, what do we call it? Let's go back. So since this is copied, we'll do this. Cut. NFS disk 1. So NFS disk 1 is what we need. So let's go back here. We go NFS, you have to do a / NFS disk 1. And if you did it with upper and lowercase characters, you do need to do that. You need to put whatever you typed in. Let's click next, finish. And now we have a data store. If we browse to it, we see there's the ISO. So if I wanted to create a VM right now, if I say, let's go back to the root here. Oop, I want that. Build this. Back to the root. Let's go to virtual machine, create a VM. And let's say create a new VM. OS is going to be Windows, because we know this is going to be a 2022. There, we'll call this test. Next, and it's going to know where the storage is. We'll say the storage is here. There's 0 bytes. For now, let's just leave it there so it can let me build it. And then what it's going to do is ask us about connections, disks, and everything. You could then tie your CD-ROM. So in this case here, we're going to go to the CD-ROM right here. And you say data store ISO file. You're going to choose ISO and choose that. So this is how you can connect your ISO to the VM. So when you first turn it on, disregard the disk space here because we still have to get to that point. But now that this ISO is connected, now when you boot this VM up, it can then go right into the ISO, which is the connected ISO file, and start installing Windows. And then when you're done, you just disconnect it and put it back to the host device and say finish. So that's why we would do this share. So that's one way to use NFS. So you can also, if you wanted to make a very large shared folder, you could do that too, an NFS share that way. You could do NFS if you have physical disk storage that does NFS sharing or NFS protocol, you could use that and connect to make a disk. But in this case, the NFS I was just showing you is just more or less to do just exactly that. Create a storage point, and that storage point could have all the files like ISOs on it. I do this with every build of my VMware environment just to make it easier to have a point or a repository of my software. So I have a simple place to go to for anything I need. And I do this on every host. Once you include it into your vSphere, then you could say mount all the hosts to that. You can easily do that. All right, so let's minimize this. We've done that NFS, we've done a window share, we've done a domain controller, and now on to the big piece. So now what we're going to do is go back out here. So you see the file share we created, NFS disk, and the ISO we put there. Let's minimize this. Let's go to ISCSI. So now we want to go to File and Storage Services. So we want to, as I mentioned, we're a poor man's lab, so we want to make a SAN. We want to have storage that's presented out to our hosts. So here's how we're going to create. So this target, we're going to create this Windows server as a target for ISCSI requests, and present disks out for other hosts to pretend, or to really to these hosts, they're going to think we have a SAN, because we're going to tell it, go to this SAN and get this disk presented to it. I'm going to show you how to do that. The very first thing you need to do is ISCSI virtual disk. You want to create a virtual disk. So now it's going to show you your disks. We want to use the 500 gigabyte drive. Click next. And we're going to call this disk 1. Next. And we're going to let's create a 50 gigabyte disk. Let's leave it dynamic. Difference between fixed and dynamic, we'll just talk about these two. If you do fixed, it's going to create a file 50 gigabytes in size right now. There's nothing in it. It's just going to take 50 gigabytes of size on your disk now. If you do dynamic, it's not going to create, it's going to create a file that can go to 50 gigabytes, but doesn't use any space until you start utilizing. So it'll grow as you use. Performance wise, if it's a database server using quick transactions, I would use a fixed disk. If it's not, I would just, if it's a really relatively normal server, I would just do dynamic and let it expand as you go. You can always extend or expand later as well. Next. And now what we want to do, this is all information from previous one. We want to say new ISCSI, just disregard that information. So new ISCSI target. So we want to create a brand new target. And we want to call this ISCSI 1. And next. And now what we want to do, it wants to know what servers can come and access this file, this disk. So now we have to say what servers will allow. What we want to do is use our Active Directory, or you can go down here and use IP address or DNS name. If you have an Active Directory, then use this. Browse, and we want to offer server 1, right? So let's go hype, check disk, check name, we got hype 1. So I want to give the server, hype 1, this 50 gigabyte disk. So now that server will only be the one to access this disk. No other servers could access this. Next, there's CHAP and reverse CHAP. This is more so you can have them type a password to connect to the services or the storage. In this case here, I know my lab, so I'm going to leave it alone. In the real world case, I would put CHAP and have a password set up. That way, nobody else can kind of force their way into the disk. Go next and create. So right now it's creating a 50 gigabyte disk. And there's 50 gigabyte disk not connected. Nobody's connected to it. Let's create another one. New disk, same thing, E drive, repeat the process, disk 2. I think I call it ISCSI. I think I call it ISCSI disk 2. Let's double check. There's a folder created called ISCSI. It was called disk 2, disk 1. So let's go disk 2, and let's keep it going with the same name frame. And you see here, there's where it's going to create the file. It's a VHDX disk because of the virtual hard drive. And let's give this a 25 gig size as well. Let's leave it dynamic. Next. And again, the target, there's ISCSI 1, and that takes it there. We want to go for, we're going to call this new target ISCSI 2. Next, we want to add hype 2. Okay, hype 2. So hype 2 is now going to be the only accessible server to this one disk. And next, we don't want to use chat. Next, great. And one more disk to do this. E. Bring this up here so we can finish this. Next, call it disk 3. Next, 25 gig as well. And we will add this one. We'll call this ISCSI 3 to keep consistency. And we'll add hype 3. So now we've created 3 ISCSI disks. And great. We've created 3 ISCSI disks. And of course, we want to create a disk that we can present to VMware. So let's go here, new disk, E, and then call this VM disk. Next, and we're going to give this one 75 gig. Dynamic, and again, new ISCSI target. We need to know the IP address of this one. So this one's going to be called VMware. And instead of VMware, sorry, back out. So the ISCSI target, new target, we're going to call it VM disk 1. It's going to ask who we're sending it to. So now we need to know the IP address of this server. So let's go back to the server. This server is 192.168.2.191. Now we can't obviously put AD. If we go here, we can't put AD because it's not part of Active Directory. So we'll go all the way down here to IP address and type in 192.168.2.191, I believe it was. Let's go back here. 191 is correct. And click OK. So now it will allow that server access to this disk. We're not going to use chat. And we're going to create the disk. So now we've created all of these disks. So these are disks. These are disks going to be used. As you see, they're only using 4 megabyte of space right now because nothing's using them. Now what we need to do is we need to go to our other servers and give them the disk. So let's go to server 1. So server 1, let's log in. And in case you've ever seen it, you click into your window, you hit Control-Alt-Insert. That's Control-Alt-Delete in VMware speak. So when you're clicking on the window, Control-Alt-Delete would do your home computer or your physical computer you're on. If the VM is in this window, it's Control-Alt-Insert, in case you didn't know that. And then usually Control-Alt releases the mouse so you can get out of your VM, if you've ever been stuck in a window. So, okay, so now let's prove we only have one disk. Let's go to this PC. There's only one disk. Right? So now we've presented a disk to this machine. It's not there yet. Let's go to Disk Manager just to kind of prove. You don't have access to Disk Manager. Awesome. Probably because I logged on as the wrong user. Anyway, let's log on local admin. Go, and I'm going to go local. Oh, it has to be a period, not a comma. There you go. And there you go. So we're logged on. We have computer management come up, and we don't see another disk. So we presented another disk to it, but it's not there yet. Well, now we need to go in and we need to go to Start. Now you can go several ways. I'm going to show you through Start, Administrative Tools, and ISCSI Initiator, or you can go up here to Tools and go to ISCSI Initiator. Now we have the initiator. Now we want to type, what is the target? What's the target machine? Well, we know we created a target on domain controller 1. So let's go 192.168. You can do server name as well. 2.170. And then as soon as you say quick connect, it's going to connect to the server. And let's go to ISCSI 1 because we know these are from residual from garbage. I'm going to connect. And there you go. Login succeeded and we're connected. Now, these ones here are inactive, so I'm just going to remove them. This one, disconnect. I'm going to go over to my discovery, and there's the only one it found because the other ones are invalid from a previous test. So we know that discovery there's the server, it's connected, and it's connected to it. Let's click OK. Let's go back to the server manager and, the computer management. And you go to disk management, there it is. There's a 50 gigabyte disk we've presented. Let's initialize it, GPT. Let's right click on it, make it a volume. Let's go back and call this serve1. So we know it's a disk. And now we have 2 disks. So now this server just thinks there's server, it was a disk presented to it over ISCSI, so over the network, using ISCSI technologies, or over the network, we're using Ethernet to present this disk from a source. The source just happens to be here. Windows is none the wiser. It's coming from another server. It's just an ISCSI going to a target. The target is presenting the disks to this server. And the same thing with server 2. We could do the same thing. And we keep repeating the same task. So let's go back. Log on as administrator. Oh, I didn't type the password right again. So you get the idea. We're going to go to computer management just to kind of prove the disk isn't there. We're going to go to tools, ISCSI initiator. We're going to type in the IP address of the ISCSI target. Click connect. And now it has that. Now see ISCSI 2, that's the one we created. Connect. Done. Close this. Minimize this. And there's a disk there, the 25 gigabytes we presented. And again, create the disk. New. Next. Serve 2. And once again, we presented a disk to another server. It thinks it's getting it from some storage device. Because again, Windows doesn't care. You provide a target, you go to the target, you got it. And this disk is writable, just like you would any other local disk. So this is a network stored storage drive. So like a NAS, you could say that, right? So ISCSI could technically be a NAS because network storage. So this target is coming from here, but for all it knows, it's coming from some physical device, a SAN, right? So this is how you build your lab with a SAN type thing. And this is useful for us when we want to do clustering, which is what we're going to do in one of our next videos, which is going to be Hyper-V doing the clustering. So we need to make sure we have disks that all 3 hosts can see. So in this case, we're just making sure that our ISCSI is working. We'll do the same thing here. Pull up computer management, prove that we don't have the disk. Not that we need to keep proving it. And let's go to ISCSI, create the target. Connect. We should see ISCSI 3. Done. And oh, jumped the gun there. ISCSI target. So we want to go 192.168.2.170. Click connect. Oh, I typed it wrong. Okay, so we didn't type it in right. So we see a disk here. Let's connect to this disk. There we go. We're connected. And there we go. And we create a disk. SRV3. So now we have 3 servers with 3 disks. Now what you can do, just go back to this multipath, this ISCSI thing here. The ISCSI initiator. When you connect to a host, you go properties. When we created the disk, it asked if we want to do multipathing or multi-channel connection. So multipathing is when you want to have multiple paths going to a disk. So when I created this disk, when we created the disk, it came up said multipathing. Now that's something I'm going to talk about when we get further to the next labs. But let's go back out of here. Just going to close that. And so we will talk about multipathing and what it's for. Multipathing is more for when you want to have this disk also reside on the other servers as well. So let's go back to our domain controller here and ISCSI. And let's go back through these ISCSI units. So let's say number 1, I want to also add it to another server. So down here, right here, we have ISCSI 1. That's that target. We want to go on to this properties, and there's the initiator. So we told it only server 1. So what if I want to share this disk with server number 2 now? So we could just go here and type hype2. Check name, checks it, done. And okay. Now this ISCSI target will allow 2 to see that number 1 disk again. How we can see that is, let's go refresh here, rescan disks. So we need to go to the ISCSI Target now. The ISCSI Initiator, sorry. Go to Connect. And see right here, allow multipath. So we are going to allow multipath, enable multipath, because we're going to have multiple servers communicating to this target. We click OK, and there we go. There's the disk. We go into Windows. We don't see it yet, because we need to go here. It's not showing us a disk. Let's rescan the disk. And we need to bring the disk online. Now it's not coming online because it's already shared elsewhere. So what we need to do is we need to get our cluster services going and other items just to make this disk work with this server. So there you go. That's the 24 gig disk. We see that number one has, right? That's a 50 gig. So I must have presented the wrong disk. So let's go back here and confirm what I just did here. So ISCSI 1, properties, right? I've added 2. General is this one. Security, no security. Connections were good. And I think I did there. And there you go. So it shows both. LUN is 0. If you create more presented disks to each of them, you want to change that LUN number. So yes, it is a 50 gig disk. For some reason, it's only reading the 20. That's pretty neat how they did that. So Hyper 1 and Hyper 2 should see this disk. Properties. We'll go here. So we've got our assigned disk, assign virtual ISCSI. So there you go. There's your target. We don't want to create a new one, so we're not going to do that. We just want to find out why this one is not connecting. So Hype 1 and Hype 2 are connected to 50 gigabyte disk. So we might need to go to Hype 2, do another rescan. Because for some reason, it's getting 24 gig, not 50 gig. Either way, what we're going to do is just go to the future. In the next video, we will talk about the exact connections. I just wanted to show this video was more to set up the domain controller, show you how we can present disks. We'll do multi-disk with the other video. So we have each one of them presented with a disk, and I got to clean up this ISCSI because the previous lab I had done. And so each one of them do have a disk presented. And now let's go on to the other one, which is ESXi. So now you won't have a storage. You have an ESXi server, and you want to give it some storage. Again, you have a SAN, right? So let's go to root. And let's bring this screen full screen. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. And click this to get everything here. So you see here we have no storage. Well, in order to do ISCSI storage, if I say new data store, it wants to give us a VMS store. This is going to be for like fiber channel or direct connected. And an NFS. Where's ISCSI? Well, ISCSI is not here. What we need to do is we need to go to adapters, and we need to install a software ISCSI adapter because it doesn't have a hardware ISCSI adapter. So we're going to click software ISCSI adapter. We're going to enable it. We're not going to use CHAP. There's our label of our host name, right? Our host information. And then what we need to do is let's go in here and remove this because we want to do this manually to show you how we do it. So we need to actually tell this thing port binding. Where do we want to bind this port to the network? So with a VMware ESXi host, you need to assign network traffic to a network adapter. So in this case here, I'm going to add port binding. There's only one network adapter. We're going to put it on this adapter and select. Normally what you would do is if you had multiple network adapters, you could create multiple different port bindings. So you can then, instead of a VMK0, you could put VMK1, that would be NIC1, and say that's for ISCSI traffic. So it's your traffic. So in this case here, I'm going to use this network adapter. In my production environment, I have a 1 gigabit network adapter for the management console, and I have my vMotion, my storage, and everything on a 10 gig adapter, because that's where we do most of our transferring. So I usually use that. In this case, in a lab, you could just bind it to your original NIC, add static target. So here it is here, the target name and IP address. So I'm gonna just get rid of that. So we don't have a static target, we have a dynamic target. So let's add dynamic target. We're just going to type in the IP address. So 192.168.2.170. That's that server that we're talking about here. Got an extra 6 in there. Once we click save, it's going to bind now to this ISCSI adapter. And this ISCSI adapter now will talk to the other host. So let's minimize this again. So this host. Now we have a disk we created for VMware, and we called that one VM disk. Let's go back to our ESXi host, which is here, pop it up. So now we see here VM65, right? Now let's go to data stores, and there's no data store, right? So we need to create a new data store. Click VMFS data store. Next. Now what it should do is we should see something coming from the ISCSI server, that disk that we have presented. We need to go back and make sure we configure our ISCSI adapter properly. So we want to rescan adapters, have this go out and rescan the adapter to make sure everything's fine, and then refresh. And then we're going to go here, oops, back here. And now let's go to devices, rescan, and let's go back to adapters and back to data stores, new data store, create NFS, and see if a rescan had brought a disk up. So it still hasn't brought a disk up. Now what we need to do is go back to our network adapters. Let's go networking. Let's go to management. We see management here. It's got the VMK0. So we want to go on the properties of this and network adapter. And we can see here, everything's fine. There's management network. There it is there. Actions. And let's go edit settings. And we see that's just that. We need to go to VMK0. We need to say edit settings from here. So we see that vMotion, and there is no ISCSI, right? There is no storage. So we know that we don't need to change anything here. We have everything set up here. IPv4, right? That's what it is. We have vMotion set up. And again, I told the NIC to use is this one to connect to the ISCSI. So what we need to do now is make sure that this NIC and this network is on the same subnet. So we know it's connected. We know it's there. So let's see if we can ping from the Windows host, make sure they can talk to each other. So let's pull this up. We can get there. So we're good. So let's go again to the ISCSI targets, disk 4, properties. And we are sharing this with 192.168.2.191. So that's the server that's supposed to be accepting it. And let's go down here to the ISCSI target, properties. And there's a target there, security none, connection, nothing there yet. Okay, let's go back to that host. Now sometimes you may need to reboot the host to make it connect. But in this case, we're just going to go back home. We're going to go to storage. We're going to go to adapters. ISCSI adapter, we want to make sure it's enabled. There's no chat. There's a binding here. It didn't save anything. So what we need to do is go back in here, add port binding, click this one, select, and go down here to add dynamic target. Let's do it again. 192.168.2.191 using port 3260. Save configuration. Let's pull this open again and make sure it saved it. Looks like it did. Okay, good. We're good. Save it again. We know it's saved, and there it is. Let's go to devices. Let's do a rescan. Now, devices should always pop up any devices we have connection to. Let's go back to adapter. Let's do a rescan. And let's go back to devices, see if it picks up anything. Okay. And we know the adapter is online. Let's go to data store. Let's see if we can find a data store now. Let's create. It should go out and find data store. So we're still not finding data store. We need to go to devices. And we don't see it there yet. So if we don't see it listing in devices, I mean, chances are it's not connecting. We need to go back to the ISCSI adapter and just see what's going on here. Okay, we don't need to do anything there. But the one thing we do need to look at is I did the wrong port. So save configuration, pull it up again, make sure it saved it. Let's pull this one away because it's itself. Why would it find itself? I typed the wrong IP address, my mistake. So now we typed in the IP address, save config, rescan, and let's go over to devices. Now devices now has that third disk. Or it shows 2 right now. When you do a rescan, it should show another disk. Let's go to adapters. We know it's good. We know it's connecting. Okay. So now what we can do, we're not going to save anything there. Let's go to data stores. Let's add a new data store because it's a brand new disk. Next, it should find a disk that's being presented, and now it does. So there we go, Microsoft ISCSI disk. We know that's our ISCSI, and that's the disk labeling it's going to give it. So let's call this VM ESXi. And you could do, so you know it's one ISCSI. 75 gigabytes. It's going to use the 75 gig. Finish. And yes. So now, if we go to disks, we now have this VM decay, or this VM disk, sorry. And we created VM disk. Let's go to browse, and there it is. There's no files on it. So that is how you create an ISCSI storage for a VMware connection. Something I always do is, for some reason, I've done it for years. When you set up an ISCSI Target, make sure you have the address right for one. Make sure you connect to a bind to an adapter. Sometimes I skip this because it's been a while since using ISCSI so much. I use fiber channel now, so I don't really do this often, but this is the way of doing it. And again, this is the way you present to your lab some ISCSI type storage that the device thinks it's coming from some SAN device that's presenting it disks. And again, it will go as fast as this disk. So I do have SSD storage, so my lab will run quick as if it's coming from a SAN. Because the SAN would either be through fiber channel or over the network anyway. So you have two types, right? Or direct connect. Most times it's either ISCSI or fiber channel. Fiber channel being the most expensive and probably the fastest out of all of them because it's not affected by routing and so forth. But there you go. So the lab, we had to set up our domain controller, which we did. We had to set up a local share just to show you how that we are making shares and we are able to access the server. And we also created, we joined the domain, these three machines. We've also created storage. We created a DNS server, and we also created an NFS share, which I showed you how you can utilize sharing ISOs to a host like ESXi. You can make a NFS share. You can also, something to cross my mind here, you can right click on this share. You can also, it's an NFS share. You can also create it as a share for everybody as well. and you can go in and edit the properties, go advanced sharing. Instead of calling NFS, you could just call it repo and take away the NFS share, right? So now it's a repo share. Permissions, everyone, full control. And not only can you use it as an NFS target, from another server, you can access those ISOs or files or install whatever you want to do. If you decide you want to install software, you can then do that as well. And there it is, repo. So I can connect to this. And there you go. Disconnect. So this way you can make that share a repo across your whole domain if you want. Because your domain controller, depending on how many users you have, will probably sit dormant many times because it's just offering policies every 90 minutes, DNS updates when it needs to, DNS resolution, when it needs to, user logons, user logoffs, anything to do with users, password changes, things like that. Or if you do any roaming profiles, things like that, the domain controller will do that. But for the most time, you can utilize in a lab, it's doing nothing other than just authenticating when you log on. You could then create extra things, extra roles on a domain controller. And sharing a repo is always a good idea for that. Just make sure that you lock it down properly. You don't want to leave it wide open so people can get in your domain controller. But that's generally a practice I do for my labs all the time. So there you have it. There's the 3 goals are met on this video. We created a domain controller. We joined the domain with 3 servers. We created an NFS share and a regular share. And the NFS share we connected to the ESXi host so we can bring down the ISO files. And we've also just showed you how you could do it on a Windows server using regular share on the same share. And I showed you how to do ISCSI, which is a pretty neat tool to use. Again, in your home lab, you can save money. Instead of buying storage, you could just utilize the ISCSI Target. Now, I created Target on this server, which again is accessible through your storage. And the servers that are using it, we use the initiator to go get the target. So with that being said, thank you for watching. We'll watch out for the next video. The next video, we will start creating the Hyper-V servers. So we'll make the roles. We'll do a proper cluster and show you how to set up multiple disks to these clusters. And then we'll play more with ISCSI in that next video as well. So thank you for watching. See you next time.